Could people on Mars see city lights on Earth? Will it still be possible for amateurs to discover asteroids after Vera Rubin? What can we expect from Mars samples? And in Q&A Plus, what happens if you put your hand across the event horizon of a black hole? All this and more in this question show. It's time for the question show. Your questions, my answers, as always, wherever you are, across my channel. If a question pops in your brain, just write it down, I'll gather them up, and I'll answer them here. All right, let's get into the questions. B. Michael Neal. Pretending Mars has an atmosphere and people, would their telescope see human activity on Earth? Before humanity sent the first spacecraft to Mars, we had really no idea what was going on the planet. But if you sort of recall the famous story, Percival Lowell, back in 1908, like the turn of the century, was looking at Mars and he was seeing structures that he thought were canals going across the surface of Mars. And it turns out he was wrong and they weren't actually there. And he was sort of imagining some Mars civilization that was drying out and they were building canals that were going across. And like in retrospect, obviously he couldn't see it, that, you know, the width of a canal that you're looking at 200 million kilometers away is going to be very, very small and you're not going to be able to see it. And you know, there were features on Mars that are very significant, like Olympus Mons, like the big volcanoes on Mars. And we didn't know about these things until we sent the first spacecraft to Mars. But we can see the ice caps, you know, they are thousands of kilometers across and we can see those features. And so would we be able to see the presence of cities, say, on the surface of the Earth from Mars? And I don't think so. I think if they were able to do spectroscopic analysis of the atmosphere of Earth, and they would detect the presence of the gases in our atmosphere, the carbon dioxide, the methane, the various gases that are given off by humanity, by life, you know, the oxygen mix, the nitrogen mix. But visually, I don't think they would be able to make out Earth's cities. They're just not that big. And so this is like another homework question, which is like, how big a telescope would a Martian need to be able to resolve cities on the surface of Earth? This is the kind of thing, like I know ChatGPT is lying to me, but the new version is pretty good. This is a relatively straightforward, like there's a mathematical formula that you use to calculate the resolving power of a telescope. You know, if you wanted to be able to see the Apollo spacecraft on the surface of the moon, you would need a telescope that's like 50 meters across. And that's why we can't see the landers on the moon, because we don't have a 50-meter telescope on the surface of the Earth. Even the Hubble Space Telescope at 2.6, James Webb at 6.5, can't see it. So ChatGPT is saying a 5-meter diffraction-limited telescope in visible light could separate 10-kilometer features at the closest approach. And so best case, it would see a 10-kilometer city like Tokyo with a 5-meter telescope. But typically you would need double those apertures, and that would be beyond the capability. So the largest telescope on Earth today would probably just barely be able to detect the presence of a city on Earth from Mars. Stanley and Tool 2647 says you'd be able to see the lights easier, I think. Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I should have been really clear. You know, the astronauts can see the city lights when they orbit the Earth. And so when the Earth was in shadow, you would be able to detect the presence of the cities. Mr. Squirrel 13. I want to discover 2 asteroids, one to name after each of my kids. Will that be even possible after Vera Rubin comes online, or am I too late to the game? Vera Rubin's going to find a lot of asteroids. I mean, you know, already the asteroid hunting robots have gotten very, very good and are finding a lot of the asteroids out there, but they're not finding them all. And so if you go out every night with a telescope or with a imaging setup and you take a bunch of pictures, you will find asteroids that the robotic hunters are missing, because Vera Rubin is looking from the southern hemisphere. And like, if you're in the northern hemisphere, then you're set, because Vera Rubin can't see stuff that's far enough north. But you got to be dedicated, right? Like, have a good telescope with a good imaging setup, image the sky, look, you know, night after night after night, you know, maybe pick the same region of the sky, something that's underserved by the rest of the astronomical community, you know, something that's going to be off the plane of the ecliptic, So the chances of you finding stuff is lower. And then just image night after night after night, look for anything that moves. And then each time you find something that moves, register the ephemeris with the Minor Planet Center, confirm that it's an already known object, and then try again and try again and try again. And maybe you'll get it. Your other chance, and is much better, is to find a comet. Amateurs find comets all the time. Look at Borisov, right? Comet Borisov is named after the guy who found it. Shoemaker-Levy 9, right? Named after Shoemaker and Levy. That there are all of these comets that are found all the time. A lot of them are found by there's a lot of comet atlases out there, a lot of comet swans out there, a lot of comet Sohos and so on. They're named after the big robotic observatories that are finding them. But still, a lot of people are finding comets. And the nice thing is, with a comet, boom, done, it's named. You get to name it. It's going to be named after you, but I'm sure you can make the case that don't name it after me, name it after my kids. With asteroids, you've got to submit the names to the IAU, to the International Astronomical Union. They've got to approve it. So for example, Jeff Metzger, who named asteroids after a bunch of science communicators like me, Phil Plait, so on, he had to suggest the name to the IAU, and then they had to approve it and ratify it. Same thing happened for Scott Manley and so on. And Brady Heron with his monster asteroid. They're all approved by the IAU. So I think your best bet, find 2 comets, and then you need to quickly put it in everyone's minds that the names are the names of your kids. Bebodic. If we bring back material from Mars and find definitive traces of ancient life but no fossils or DNA, could we ever tell whether that life was related to life on Earth? Oh, that would be rough, right? That if we find ancient fossilized life on Mars, the DNA would be destroyed. And so all we would have would be the chemical components. But if it's like fossils on Earth, it gets replaced by rock. And so it's not the original material. It is a rock simulation, a recreation of what the animal looked like. And so we would just have to be able to go on what it looked like as, its body structure and so on. This is the problem that paleontologists have to deal with. Like, I know there's like hopes you could find, wasn't there a movie about them finding DNA in a mosquito trapped in amber or something like that, right? So, there have been proposals, and I feel like there are like possible avenues that people could try to get DNA, but Mars and Earth, if they did have life going back and forth, they probably diverged 4 billion years ago plus. Who knows? But we would need life that was more recent to be able to match it up. We would need life that was active there today. Like, that's what you need, is you need to find life on Mars today. Underground, in the brines, bacteria doing its thing, that you can take a sample and try to check its DNA and find out if we're related or not. Otherwise, you're just going to be seeing, little fish, little Mars fish. And like, maybe there would be some kind, but the life forms that would have transferred from Earth to Mars would be bacteria. And then the bacteria would have gone on to evolve into whatever forms that it took. So it would be really tricky. I mean, I think the thing that we would probably find on Mars that would be the sort of the likely evidence that tells us there was once life on Mars is stromatolites, bacterial colonies. And they're sort of a very obvious structure that bacteria can form, and that they're very much like fossils. And so we would find evidence of these blobs of ancient bacteria. They would be rock now, but the structure, the form, the shape would be like life, and the chemical components in the rocks around it and so on. There would be lots and lots of clues that we could use. And so if we could look at these stromatolites and find them on Mars, that would be really compelling. But we wouldn't be able to know if we shared a common ancestor with the bacteria that formed those stromatolites. So we need living Mars samples, or recently dead, with actual intact DNA to be able to find out. It's time to shout out all the new $5 patrons and above: Justinius Rabinovus, Kevin Nitka, Michelle Desereau, Ben Reese, Thomas Kier, Jeremy Draws, James Frank, Richard E. Culler, Josh Hernandez, and Dina. Join the club at patreon.com/universetoday. Page Potter 4682. What's something that professionals worry about that the public rarely considers? So I think that is a very interesting question. And I think this gets really to the heart of the issue that we have with the distrust in expertise, which I know I've been kind of ranting about for the last couple of weeks. I'm kind of obsessed with it right now. And that is that for some reason, and I think we know the reason, the public has grown distrustful of expertise, be it scientific expertise, be it political expertise, economic expertise, any kind of expertise. And the reasons, I think, and, there are books that have been written that there is a campaign, that there is that making people not trust experts allows people who make money to continue making money. Because, if the expert is telling you that continuing to pollute the atmosphere is going to cause problems down the road, then just undermine the credibility of the expert and then you won't have this problem. And so I think when you talk to scientists, when you say professional, that's the kind of the context that I'm going to use here. You get, I think, a very different experience than what I think the sort of the zeitgeist is trying to tell people. Like when you go and read on Facebook and someone posts something about something interesting that happened in science, then you'll see a lot of people going scientists are dumb and they're just making stuff up and blah, 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 right? But when you talk to them, right, skepticism is their number one sort of instinct. That if they hear that if somebody makes a truth claim, this is true, that is true, whatever, their first instinct is to be uncertain and to be skeptical and to require evidence and proof and a fairly high level of it. You're seeing this play out in with, say, the whole 3I Atlas controversy, right? Where there are some people who are saying that this thing is an alien spaceship. And then on the other hand, the entire scientific community is going, prove it. You say that it's an alien spaceship, show us some alien spaceshipy stuff. And if you can't, then you can't make that claim, or you shouldn't make that claim. It is not a credible claim. And that just in general, that is woven into a scientist's instincts, their methodologies, the way they approach everything. And that in general, they distrust their own work. They recognize their own sort of cognitive biases, the ways that the human brain can go wrong, and that they've built an entire structure and a framework, peer review, double-blind studies, all of these methodologies which are designed to weed out the human biases and get you closer to whatever is the truth of nature. And that I think that people are so used to, in their personal life and the people that they interact with, that trusting your gut, following your instinct is a viable way to make sense of the world. And that faith, in a kind of a spiritual sense, is a reasonable way to figure out whether or not you should believe something. And that is just the opposite of how the scientific community feels about things. That if you're going to make a truth claim, you need to provide significant and sufficient evidence for that claim. And if you can't, then you have to set it aside and go, you can't make that claim. And that I think that when the general public collides with the scientific community, and the scientific community is saying things that meets the threshold according to science's methodologies, peer review, right? Lots of careful work, certain levels of sigma, of uncertainty, and so on, that they don't appreciate it, and that they think that scientists are just making stuff up. And I think the scientists are making stuff up is a very new thing. And I think there is a campaign to undermine this very rigorous method that gets the job done. And so I think, the best thing to do is read a book, read Carl Sagan's Demon Haunted World, which is just a great way to sort of build your BS, your baloney detector, which is what Carl Sagan called it. Or take a science class, right? Just at your university. about the topic that maybe you're a little skeptical about, and sort of just like understand the mountain of evidence that has gotten you to this place. And so I'd say that is the biggest thing that is sort of what I think the general public doesn't sort of appreciate from professional scientists. You know, they've dedicated their lives to studying this phenomena, you know, like decades and decades of their lives. And everything that you can think of, they have probably either discussed or considered. And yet they continue to sort of push the boundaries of it. Did you know that you can watch the same video with no ads and get a bonus question over on Patreon completely for free? We call it Q&A Plus. In this week's bonus question, what happens if you put your hand across the event horizon of a black hole? And I'll put a link in the show notes. All right, those are all the questions that we had this episode. Thank you, everyone who asked your questions in the YouTube comments, everybody who joined me for the live show. Now, we are going to be doing our next live show on Monday, December 29th. It fits sort of nicely in between Christmas and New Year's, and so no break. We just carry on. And obviously, you know, we weren't here for a month, so, you know, want to catch up on some of the live shows. So that's heading normal 5 p.m. Pacific time. Now, I'm going to chat about sort of a recent announcement from the Veritasium channel and sort of just like how science YouTubers are getting invested in by various private equity funds and so on. But first, I'd like to thank our patrons. Thanks to Abe Kingston, Bear Lake Roofing, Brian Bodie, Caradon, Chuck Hawkins, Commander Bielek, Cy Nelson, Dark Finger, David Gilton, David Matz, Evan Pro, Greg Feely, James Clark, Jeremy Madden, Jim Burke, Jordan Young, Josh Schultz, Marcel Smith, Michael Purcell, Nordspace, OneStepForAnimals.org, Paul Roebuck, Rin Kaidu, Richard Williams, Sean Sargent, Steve Munley, Team 49, Telescopes Canada, Wolfgang Klotz, and Zeldaborg Galactic Defender, who support us at the Master of the Universe level. And all our patrons, all your support means the universe to us. So I was watching YouTube this morning, as I do, and there was a video from Derek from Veritasium saying, "Am I retiring?" or something like that. And this video was him kind of explaining what's happened to the Veritasium channel since they've gotten an investment from a private equity firm. I think it's Electrify. And sort of, you know, there's been a lot of concern on YouTube about these private equity firms that are investing in various science YouTubers. You know, some have gone well. I would say Veritasium has gone fairly well, or you look at, say, MadPat with Game Theory and those channels, they've gone pretty well. Others have gone poorly. And it's really kind of hit or miss depending on the combo of the creator and the company that is investing in it. And I think there is this kind of blanket cynicism that you see on the comments of those videos. Like, well, there we go. There's a sellout. You know, we can't trust anything that's coming from this video anymore. And I think Derek lays out in his video quite sort of reasonably how, you know, as creators, you are just burning the candle at both ends. And there's very little financial revenue that you get to see from what you do. And so you have to work harder to do something that, you know, you could do other jobs, right? You've chosen science communication because this is sort of like a calling that you do, not as sort of a quick cash grab. And that as you scale up, as you make a little bit more revenue from YouTube, but like not enough, then you sort of end up working harder. And I think that is sort of a reasonable thing to say, okay, like how do I make this sustainable? If I want to continue this operation of some kind of communications system, how do I continue that? So, university is very different. And so I think it's important to explain because like I have gotten the same emails from the same companies who have invested in various YouTubers and I just delete them. I don't reply to them. And it's not like I think it's a bad idea. I think if I didn't have Universe Today as an established sort of journalism publishing site that had been around for 25 years, like if I was just only doing YouTube videos and sort of thinking about how I spend my time. And like I make from YouTube revenue, probably half of the money that it takes to pay the salaries of the people who work on the YouTube videos without me taking a salary, right? Like just like understand that. Like imagine you did a business and you made half of the money to pay the salaries and you didn't take a salary. That's like YouTube only. That's how my world would work. Now, in the olden days, I made money from ad revenue. And so the ad revenue compensated for the loss that we made on the YouTube videos. The YouTube videos provided better brand, better connection, a way for me to connect with the audience. And so there was like, in my mind, there was like this reasonable system. And then the video that I made about a year ago talking about sort of like how everything's changed, the advertising network is out, the AI is taking over, the algorithms are sort of gearing towards engagement and less towards, creating valuable content. And like I was at the breaking point. And so while I think a lot of the other creators don't have the momentum and they go, okay, when that next offer comes in and it's money that allows you to continue doing the work and not be overwhelmed, you kind of have to take it. And the sort of investment environment today is not as bad as it was, 25 years ago when I was sort of in this world, sort of considering getting investments in startups that I was working on. And for me, I was able to say, hey, join our Patreon. If we get enough funding, then we can just go patron only and only be funded by this methodology. And for me as a creator, that creates stability without the influence of an outside investor, which can be good. They can bring resources to the table. They can provide you with legal support and financial support and connect you with other people and make you more legitimate. Like there's value there for sure. And there is also the possible sort of influence from people who don't necessarily have your vision in mind, who aren't looking to and they're looking for some kind of outcome. They're looking for a payout, essentially. They want a monetization event. And my background, if you probably don't know, my background is actually in sort of the startup business. 25 years ago, more, I started tech companies in Vancouver. One of them went public. Another one went sort of public. I've been through, raising money, bringing on investors, and I hate it so much. I don't like that experience at all. And so that has kind of clouded, sort of driven my judgment for how I run Universe today. And I think, for a lot of investors, what they're looking for is some kind of monetization event. They invest in you. They want you to be able to turn into something bigger, and they want to be able to cash out, make some multiple on their investment. That's the only reason they do it. Right? Like they may say they're like going to connect. We want to be able to, we love your vision and your mission and blah, blah, blah. They want to make money and their investors want them to make money. And so they have to figure out a way to make money from these science communicators, which they're investing in. And I don't know whether they can. I mean, right now, looking at the kind of forces that are arrayed against us as creators, industrializing that at a larger scale, I'm not sure that's a bet that's going to pay off. I prefer to run things at a shoestring, to be sort of completely controlled by me and the team, but mostly me as the person who runs the company. And I'm not interested in a monetization event. Like as long as I can pull a salary, as long as I can keep doing my work, as long as I get to be happy, then the company is doing its job, right? I measure the profit of Universe today on, does it make me happy? And if it makes me happy, then we're on the right track. And if it's not making me happy, then I need to make changes. And money does not equal happiness. You need a baseline to be able to survive. But beyond that, it's really about doing something that you love and you enjoy. And it's only going through this process of dealing with investors and going through this thing, you can decide whether that's for you or not. And for me, it's not. And so that's why I continue. But I think more power to the creators who are doing this and taking this money and going down this path. It makes a ton of sense and will allow them to continue their work if they're able to get the kind of freedom and continue to get the resources. And if the promise is made or the promise is kept, right? In other cases, it all goes horribly, horribly wrong. But in my case, we're totally supported by the patrons. We don't need to be concerned about these. And because I measure, am I happy? Dealing with investors does not make me happy. And so therefore, I am happier. All right. Well, that was my perspective on this. We may see you next year.